Hi everybody, welcome to the jungle. So today's topic is database patching insights, and on the picture you see a jungle, and I would like to thank personally Francisco Munoz, because this picture would have never existed if Francisco wouldn't have invited us, me and my VP Roy Swanger, to New Zealand and Australia a long while ago. So this is actually the New Zealand jungle. And today I would like to give you a bit more insights into the patching jungle. So my name is Mike Dietrich. I'm the product manager for database upgrades and migrations at Oracle. And you may miss the patching topic in my title, and I don't volunteer for that. I came to the patching topic simply because patching and upgrades often go hand in hand. When we upgrade to a new release, we try to enforce that you patch to the most recent bundles before. And even when we test a lot, we come across this or that issue where we may request a patch or sometimes even a bit more patches. And so this is how I got tied into patches. And in addition, I like to be very precise in things. And I realized over time that some of the patching readmes are not obvious or contain some things which don't jump into your eyes and are easily to understand. So I started blogging about that, and you find a lot of information about database patching on the upgrade blog, mikedietrich.de.com. And you can follow me also on Twitter if you don't do already. And it's absolutely safe to follow me on Twitter. I use Twitter solely for technical topics, so you won't see any music recommendations, food pictures, or political opinions on Twitter from my side. So now enjoy the next 45 minutes, and I would like to guide you at first to the upgrade blog. So if you need the slides, they're already uploaded. So you go to mikedietrich.de.com and you tap on the slides button and then to webinar 2020, and you will find all the decks we presented in the past months actually. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll find the patching slide deck as well. Now, why do you want to upgrade? Upgrade, patching, as I said, they go hand in hand with each other. So let me briefly show you the lifetime support policy, because in case you're still on 11.204, you need to be aware that in a few weeks, the support for 11.204 basically runs out. You can extend it with an extra thing called market-driven support. Here it is yellow in the slide. And the market-driven support applies only to severity 1 and security issues. And it has a price tag, so it's not for free. So be aware of that. If you would like to upgrade, don't go to 12.1. And if you're on 12.1, you are already in extended support period as well, as you can see in the slide. This is an extra paid thing as well, unless you have a ULA or Pula with Oracle. And the question is, where should you upgrade to? So before we discuss very briefly 12.2, 18, and 19, let me show you this here. We have now made a clear distinction between long-term support and innovation releases. So long-term support release, for instance, is 19C. That means 19C has at least 5 years of premier support. So the black bar on the slide, 5 years at least, plus at least an additional 3 years of extended support. Extra paid. So red means you have to pay an extra fee on top based on your support fee you pay to Oracle. If you have a ULA or a Pula agreement with Oracle, please talk to your salesperson, because then you can include the extended support into your offering, as far as I know, at no extra cost. Innovation releases. This is what will happen after 19C. So the next releases will be innovation releases with a very short support time frame. So be aware, innovation releases are meant for development purposes, to test and try out things. Maybe you would like to develop something based on blockchain tables, a feature which is coming out soon with the next releases. And then you give this to your developers. But be aware that you will need to certify the long-term support release afterwards, or go live on the long-term support release. So this is our clear recommendation, because otherwise, if you go live on innovation releases, basically the day you go live, you have to take care on the next upgrade already again. So innovation, very short, but with new features. Long-term support release, it's the release you all will go live on because it gives you the long-term support. And this brings me to the 12.2 release family. So in the 12.2 release family tree, we started with 12.201. And a lot of people understood that this is the new 12.2 release, so second release in the tradition, that more stable release. So a lot of people went live on 12.201. Then there was 18, and we said, hey, we have now a new release numbering scheme, and this is a new release. What we didn't say clearly is 18 is 12.202. And 18 doesn't have a long support period and no extended support. 19 is the long-term support release. And 19 is the one you all will need to upgrade to. And it's 12.203, as you can see in the slide. And the support goes until end of April 2024. And you can even extend it with extended support. Or if you're in the luxury situation that you have a ULA agreement, then you basically know that you are safe until almost mid of 2027. So a very long period from now on. This is why you all will upgrade to 19C. 18C has no extended support. And as we did this strange change in the release numbering with 12.2 to 18, we understood that a lot of people went live on 12.2.1 thinking this is the ultimate 12.2 release. And so if case you are live on 12.2.1, we added something at no extra cost. This is why it's light red on the slide. It's called limited error correction support. And the limited error correction support means that once the premier support for 12.2.1 runs out end of November this year, in 2020, we add at no extra cost limited error correction support, which applies to severity 1 fixes, to security fixes, and very important, we release also the release upgrades, so the quarterly patch bundles, and you will be able to request merge patches on top of these release bundles if you need them. And the merge patches necessarily don't have to include just SEV1 fixes. So no worries here. We support you. We understood the message, and Oracle reacted to that. So the release numbering format, I think this was not very cleverly communicated by us. We had a 5-number format before where the 3rd and the 5th number were never used for the database, actually. So we said, hey, let's shrink this down to 3 numbers. So the first number represents the year we release, like 19 for the release in 2019. The next number gives you the update version, so it's the major patch version. And the last number should be 0, but could be also represent a revision, and I'll explain in 2 minutes what a revision exactly is. So the no format looks like 1970. The good thing here is, if you deal with a customer or you deal with me and I ask you where on which release you are right now, and you tell me, Mike, I'm on 1970, I know exactly that you are on the April 2020 release update. So this makes life much easier. And patch versus upgrade, a distinction up front. How do we differ that? When we apply a patch from the release numbering scheme, the first number stays constant. So 1919 on both sides. Then it's a patch. It changes the second or the third number. Or it doesn't even change the number because you applied a one-off patch which has no effect on the number. So if you go from 1930 to 1980, that means we applied a patch. And a patch binary will always be applied with opatch. Whereas when we do an upgrade, we change the first number of the release. So for instance, when we go from 18 to 19, that is an upgrade. And this is happening either via auto upgrade or via DB upgrade, the packaged tool on the command line. Now patching before 12.2. So until 12.102, how did patching look like? And we had PSUs, patch set updates, and bundle patches. So we had the base release, that is the black brick on my slide here. And on the left side, you see the patch set updates. So patch set updates mainly contain security and regression fixes. So regression fix is a fix for something which really affects a lot of customers. something really bad, or something which got introduced in the previous PSU and need to be fixed afterwards. A quarter later, you see on the left side of the slide, we add now the black bars, new security fixes, new regression fixes. On the right side of the slide, you see the bundle patches. And the bundle patches in 11 days were meant only for engineered systems. So in 11.2, it was clear. You have a non-engineered system, PSUs. You have an engineered system, bundle patches. With 12, this got changed. So we tried to convince a lot of customers to move to bundle patches, even on non-engineered systems. But people got really frozen on PSUs. And the general problem here was, it was not so simple to move from PSUs to bundle patches or the other way around. So once you had been settled on a track, either the PSU track or the bundle patch track, you basically were sitting there. But the problem for us actually was, we had customers, or I still have customers, and they had like 120 one-off fixes on top of a PSU in 12.1. So this is bad, because when you go through the patches, you see that like 80 or 90 of them were included already in bundle patches, or even more. So we tried to convince people, still people were sitting on a bundle patch track. Now the bundle patch contained the entire PSU, plus in addition optimizer fixes, and since sometime in 2017, I think, optimizer fixes which change the behavior and don't just fix wrong result issues off by default. And functional fixes, which means a new command or a little extension for something. And a quarter later, the new ones get added as well. Now with 12.2, we changed that. With Oracle Database 12.201, we started removing PSUs. There are no PSUs anymore, which I personally like a lot. Our PSUs for me were extremely painful. I always had to find out, are you on PSUs or are you on Exadata? Then all these one-offs, as I told you already. So we said, hey, get rid of PSUs, just make updates. So we have the base release again, and a quarter after we release the base release, we release also update 1. And you see from the contents, this is exactly the same as a bundle patch was before. So bundle patch, release update, same thing from the contents. We have security, regression fixes, functional fixes, optimizer fixes off by default. And a quarter later, we release update 2. And as before, they are cumulative. That means update 2 contains all the fixes from update 1, plus the new ones either marked in yellow for optimizer and functional, or black for security and regression fixes here. But at the same time we release this update 2, we release also revision 1 for update 1. So this is now a bit puzzling when you see this the first time. And when you compare now revision 1 and update 2, you see the differences is that the revision 1 gets the black bars, the security and regression fixes, but doesn't get the yellow ones for optimizer and functional fixes. And we make it even more complicated, because a quarter later, we have now update 3, which contains update 2 plus the new ones, and it doesn't even fit on a PowerPoint slide here anymore. And at the same time, we release revision 1 in the middle of the slide for update 2. So you see now the red fixes get added, only security and regression fixes. And at the same time, we release revision 2 on the right side of the slide, which is based on update 1 and adds now the same red fixes for security and regression fixes. What this slide doesn't tell you, there's no revision 3 coming. So after this, we do a cut. Update 1 then is ended, and for in the next quarter, there would be revision 2 for update 2, and so on. So you can imagine over a while, this gets quite complicated. And this is why I would like to show you a timeline example at first. So here we go with Oracle 18c. We released 18.2 in April 2018. This was the beta containing already update 1. And then in July, we released the on-prem release, 18.3.0. With the same time, the first revision for the April for those customers who started on beta. And in October, we have now 18.4, 18.3.1, 18.2.2. And keep in mind, there's no other red one coming. So there's no 18.2.3 coming in January. So when we go to January, we just add for the next line the revisions. And of course, we add 18.5.0. At the same time here in January, we had the beta and the Exadata preview version for 19C available. And in April 2019, we released the 19C on-prem, and we went forward with the 18C bundles. And of course, which is not on the slide here, we had also the 12.2.01 release updates. So when we go into future and we go really into future, like 2 years in the future, from now on, then the slide looks like that. And you say, wow, this is cool. You can do this with PowerPoint. Yes, you can. But the reason why I show you that is not to demonstrate my PowerPoint skills. The reason is simply to show you that there's, first of all, a huge variety of fixes. And this always implies that you sitting there and saying, what should I do now? Really? And second thing why I'm showing you that is not just to scare you a bit, but also keep in mind 18C has no extended support. So in that case, in 2021, this is less than a year from now on, the patching ends for 18C. And you still sit there and say, and what should I do? So first, I tell you what you could do. So the good thing with RUs and RURs is you can jump back and forth. So let's say you had started actually with, my recommendation would be you download the base release, which is 19.3.0, and let's say you started in April or May 2020, and you took 19.7.0, which was the most recent release update at this time. So then now in October, you took 19.7.2, a release update revision, because somebody told you, oh, this is the stability path. And in January, you take 19.8.2, and then you decide, no, now you understood release update revisions are not the greatest thing on earth. So you jump to, in April, to 19.11. And so you can really jump back and forth. What you could do also, if you look at July 2022, you can jump up and down. What you should never do, we don't block this technically, but you should never jump to the left. Because if you jump to the left side here on that slide, that would mean that you lose security content. So you can jump up and down, and you can, or should jump to the right. That's the recommendation, but not to the left. You would lose security content. So be aware of that. Now, my recommendation, what you should do to make your life much easier, you stay on release updates only, unless Oracle support gives you a clear recommendation to use a revision. But if that does not happen, you please stay on release updates. First of all, you see it on a slide. That slide looks much nicer, much easier to digest, and it's very simple. Yeah? The last number of the release, always 0. Wonderful. Why do I recommend that? And why am I not recommending release update revisions? It's very simple. I'll show you an example. And I call this the RUR trap. Because we marketed this at the beginning as the stability track, but when you look very close, and here the example with 18, let's say you went on 18.3.2, so the track to the revisions, revision 2, and then you stay on the revision track. Then when you go from 18.3.2 to 18.4.2, you think, I add just a new security and regression fixes, right? No. You secretly consume also 18.4.0 and 18.4.1. So at this point, you get also the optimizer fixes off by default, some other fixes, and also the functional fixes, but dating 6 months back. So now you could still insist and say, yeah, but Oracle knows now and made it more stable and aged out the regressions, and it's maybe true. Yes, but now open a service request and request your free one-off patches on top of that because they were not included yet. This will take a bit, and it's not straightforward. I demonstrate this with example numbers, and then I think it makes it even more clear what I mean here. Let's assume An RU contains always 100 fixes. So the July one 100, the October one 200, the January one then 100 new ones, 300, and so on. Very simple example. 25 of these 100 are security fixes only. 75 are the other fixes. Just to make it very simple. Now, the RUR1 adds, we go to the bottom of the slide. So we start with 100 in July. In October, we add just 25 because only security fixes. And in January, another 25. So we are at 150. And now with this logic, you would think, oh, and in April, I'm at 175, right? Because you add only security and regression fixes. This is not true, because now you secretly consume the RU from October, the 6-month-old RU. So you jump by 100 fixes. And this goes forward. So every future RUR you go to on your track has 100 new fixes, and you consume always the 6-month-old RU. This is why I think RURs are just an escape sometimes in the last resort, but only if Oracle support tells you. Otherwise, you stay with RUs, makes your life easier, and you are on the current patches. Everything is much better now. So welcome to the jungle. Why this title? Actually, some of you may remember there was this famous Guns N' Roses song, Welcome to the Jungle, with this guitar riff at the beginning. And when I heard this the first time, long time ago, it blew me away. This was really turning the rock world upside down. And I still have the record here in my room, and I like this record a lot. So patching in the jungle, why do I do this analogy with patching in jungle? Simply because I realized over time that patching is not obvious for all of you. And I was invited at a German Oracle user group for a panel where like 200 people were in the room, and they had a lot of questions about patching. And I know also from discussions with customers that what we think at Oracle is obvious is not always obvious to you. And so let me bring some light into the jungle. And we start with patching basics. So the database patching process will be next one, and then some tips for patching success. First of all, why do you need to patch? Security. Really. Everybody must have heard of the famous Equifax breach where the DBA team wanted to react to an alert given by Apache for struts, and the management decided not to apply that patch because it would interrupt business and it's not so important and all that. Yeah, well, 43 million US customers were affected. Larry Ellison ranted a lot about that at stage at Open World a while ago, because I guess his data was affected here as well. And just to give you an idea, this is from 2019, where Equifax had to pay 650 million US dollars for the largest ever data breach settlement. So settlement means this is an agreement. This is not the damage which has happened. This is just an agreement to not being fined more and more and more, or sued, actually. So this is really, really, really expensive. And this is just the settlement, not the entire damage. So security issues can really be a big problem these days. And not only these days, but generally. And I had a situation a long while ago when a CIO sat across the table, actually in Asia. And once I explained all the patching and the upgrading, and he smiled a very friendly smile at me and said, Mike, my database is not facing the internet. Why should I patch and upgrade? I'm happy with the features of Oracle 8i. And I said, yeah, well, listen, 92% of the malware gets not distributed directly on your database server. It comes into your network via email attachments. And it's still true these days. There's nothing different here. And the malware distributes over your network. And I'm pretty certain that your database server has a connection to your normal network. It's not isolated. It's not on a lonesome island and just sitting there and doing some database processing. It's connected. So the malware finds its way. So you need to protect your databases. And to protect your databases, you need to patch on a regular basis. And There are two tools which are important with patching, opatch and datapatch. So opatch applies the binaries. The instance, so the SGA, will be down on that server. This allows you in a RUC environment to do this rolling server node by server node, and then the database can stay up. But in all other cases, single instance cases, you bring down the instance, you bring down the database. Datapatch then applies the SQL, the PL SQL changes afterwards, and of course, the database must be up. Then we have a lot of patch types. So we have one-off patches, and you find always these two terms, one-off, interim patch. And support has a famous track record, or the people who are responsible, actually not support, but the people who are responsible for the patching, they have a famous track record for changing the terms over time. And sometimes it's really strange. So one-off and interim patch are exactly the same, no difference. It's a single patch. A merge patch, that means two or more single patches, one-off patches put together, combined. And a bundle patches, now we have a lot, like 100 or 1,000, and we put them together, and this is then a bundle patch. So bundle patch examples in the old days, PSU and bundle patch, or nowadays release update, or not even on the slide because I'm not a fan of them, release update revisions. Now, very important, when you apply a patch, the patch binary, we have an inventory on disk, and the inventory easily can be queried with opatch ls inventory, and it tells you which patches are applied. Make it also a rule when you open a service request. It's always, almost always helpful to just upload your opatch ls inventory as well, because this gives support a clear view on which patches you applied on. You can query the inventory also from inside the database, and since 12.2 also from multi-tenant PDBs with dbms q opatch. And in addition, so this is for the binary part. In addition, for the datapatch part, you can query what datapatch did with DBA registry SQL patch, or in a multi-tenant environment, CDB registry SQL patch. So the recommendation is out-of-place patching. Even though you can patch in place, still, we don't forbid it, but you should patch out of place. Makes your life easier and limits or decreases your downtime. So you have your original home, and you either clone your home, or these days it's easier, you download the gold image, the 1930, unzip it, apply the patch. I'll show you later a great technique how to do this in one pass. And so you have now the patched home. Now you shut down your database, and you restart it in the new environment, and then you run datapatch. And when you have a standby, you can do standby first patching, and in RUC environments, you can do rolling patching. But the idea is you do it in a separate home. Now, the database patching process itself. And the database patching process itself starts with find the right patches. Quarterly, we release patches, patch bundles. And right now, we just released the October RUs. And when you look at the security alert page, you see next date is January, then April, July, October. So it's always the Tuesday closest to the middle of the month in January, April, July, and October for the quarterly patches. And when the quarterly patches get released, you should, and I do the same, you should check the risk matrix. So in the risk matrix, you first of all see which components are affected. And then in the middle of the slide, you see the base score. So the high score is 10. And this is not an idea of Oracle, actually. This is a common thing not defined by us. So if a patch score is 8 here, that is really very critical. And you'll see it's Java VM, it's multimedia in this example here. So if you don't have both in your database, you don't care. When you go to the right side of the slide, you see the supported versions affected. And if it starts here with 11.204 and goes through all releases, that means basically all Oracle releases are affected here. But we list only those which are currently under support. So be aware of that. It doesn't mean that 10.205 is not affected. We just don't have 10.205 under support anymore. So it may be still affected. So be aware of that. Something like this from the July 2019 one, if the core RDBMS 9.8, this is close to the high score of 10. This means you must patch. Of course, if you took now the October 2020, this fix is also included because they are cumulative. No worries here. Yeah. Then OJVM. OJVM is a good keyword because OJVM, I did a like a check for all the security alerts dating back until January 2015, and you see it from the graph here. OJVM had an average score of 7.9, and some of the quarterly patches contained not only one OJVM patch, but also several ones. So be aware, it basically tells you if you have OJVM, you must patch. There's no way out. Then the check for you is OJVM installed in your database? So your query DBA registry. And here you see Java VM, Java server, JServer, Java virtual machine. That means OJVM is present in your database. And when you know that, then you have to decide, do somebody use OJVM? If yes, patch it quarterly. If not, you can disable it with the mitigation patch, or you can rip it out of the database. Sounds mean, but it's a good solution. So if your application are using OJVM, and this is not trivial to find out, so I strongly recommend you this Moss node here mentioned on the slide, because this Moss node has several checks to find out if an application is really using OJVM in the Oracle database. And be aware, if you have a Java application, that does not mean that it uses OJVM. Most Java applications don't use OJVM, even though OJVM would give a lot of performance benefit because the sources then are compiled inside the database. And tests for external guys have shown that this is much faster than running an external Java application against the database. Still, I would say more than 90% of Java applications don't use OJVM. If you find out an application is using OJVM, you need to patch it quarterly. So it's a separate patch from RUs and bundle patches, separate download. I'm not a fan of the combo patches, if you ask me that. I like to have the separate pieces. It requires downtime or a blackout of the Java subsystem. So also this Moss node tells you how to avoid blackouts, from which release on that works, and so on. And with Oracle Database 20c or the future releases, it's planned that OJVM can be patched without any interruption, not even to the Java subsystem. If you found out that nobody is using OJVM, you could use the mitigation patch. The mitigation patch is there in all your environments since August 2018, something like that, July 2018, I think. That means you have a small patch, you execute a script in your database, and this script allows you now to disable the Java subsystem. If the Java subsystem is disabled, OJVM security flaws don't hit you anymore, because if Java subsystem can't be used, a patch can't expose or misuse any of the security breaches in OJVM. The only downside of the mitigation patch is whenever you patch, whenever you upgrade, you need to disable a mitigation patch and enable the Java subsystem. Then you patch, and afterwards you disable the Java subsystem by enabling the mitigation patch again. And this is a bit awkward, but we checked this, for instance, during database upgrades. A lot of our customers went this route. They removed it from the database. And if you think my blog post here about how to remove it is something like unofficial, no worries. There's official Moss nodes. They are all called save, repair, and reinstall, or repair and reinstalling JVM. But what you basically do is you stop after the remove, because all these both two nodes here, they explain first you need to remove OJVM and all dependent components. And this is a bit the downside here of this removal process, because if you have dependent components on OJVM, you would remove them as well. But basically, when you do this route, you remove according to the notes or to my blog, and then you stop. And then it's not there anymore. So it's an official way to get rid of OJVM if you need to. Then the database and several homes we apply have JDKs. For instance, grid infrastructure magically has a JDK as well. Be aware that all these JDKs are typically very outdated, especially in old Oracle releases. And some customers reported frequently that if they have like security check scripts, they report also JDK being outdated. The database release update delivers since April 2020 always a new JDK as well. But unfortunately, a one 3 months old, which is deemed as the latest stable proven version. Be aware, if your security check scripts log that, you may apply a JDK update as well by yourself. And I blogged about this. So quarterly, I have blog posts patching all my environments. You see it already with the October 2020 patches. So typically, if I'm around, I do this the night after the patches get released. And also about the JDK here. Now download and install the patches is the next step. So now we know there are patches around. We have figured out it's really important to apply them. Now we need to download them. And what we do is, the process is straightforward. We check for the newest OPatch version. This is by heart, I can tell you. Always use the newest OPatch. Makes your life much easier. Download and unzip the patch or patch bundle. Check for conflicts. Shut down the instance using this home, utilizing this home you would like to patch. Unless you have a rack environment, then you do it rolling with opatch auto. And then apply the binary. So opatch, still, really, I need to insist you download the newest opatch. It's very simple. You remove your existing $Oracle Home opatch directory. You copy into your Oracle Home the patch from 688.0880, and then you unzip it. And once you unzip it, it creates the opatch directory. And in the subdirectory, you find opatch, and you find datapatch, and all that. So it's very simple. Make this a standard process, scripted, whatever. And then you need to find the right patch. And I guarantee you, if you go now to my Oracle support and you type in October 2020 RU for, let's say, Spark, you find everything, but for sure you won't find that release update you're searching for. This is why this note here is one of my favorite notes. And you see it on the left side of the note. There's this small yellow star. By default, this is gray. When you open this note and the star is gray, you tap on it, and then it becomes a favorite. And in the middle of the Moz login screen, you have your favorites. And it's just a drop-down list. And you can also, I marked, for instance, the 688, the opatch one. There's a separate category then under your favorites for patches. And I have this one here as my most favorite Moz nodes. Because here, I go in and click on Oracle Database Updates, and then 19C, and then I get the patch. Very simple, the fastest way. opatch, why I insist that you need the newest? We had a terrible issue with opatch util cleanup. So this removes a few files from the .patch_storage directory, the hidden directory. And unfortunately, this had a big flaw, I think until the April opatch. When you run the opatch util cleanup, it cleaned or tried to clean also some OS libraries, because the remove command was not settled correctly there. In a database home, this is not so harmful. In a grid infrastructure, this was brutally harmful, because there you run as root. And then the cleanup cleaned up OS files, and many of them, which is not cool, really not. And honestly, I have to confess, I never read the opatch README, because as I explained to you, the process is so simple to apply it. So I never checked the README. They put it in uppercase letters in the README, the owners, and said, hey, with the 25 version for 11.2 or the 21 version for 12, 18, and 19, all is fixed. And yes, it is, but be aware of such things. Now we have the patch. We found it, we downloaded it, we need to apply the changes to the database. So we start up the database in the new patched home. So let's assume we apply the patch with opatch. And time doesn't allow that I demonstrate it here, but we have videos on the blog via the video screen where we show also the patching process. So start up all your databases in this home. In a multi-tenant environment, you need to start also the pluggable databases. A database needs to be started in order to digest the changes, of course. And then we run the patch scripts with datapatch. So datapatch got born for multi-tenant. It allows to patch not only the one database, but also root, seed, and all the PDBs. And since RU April 2019, we increased also the parallelism for PDBs. It's very helpful if you pre-compile, meaning before you invoke datapatch, you run a utlrp, a quick one, and it tries to compile invalid objects. You can also control this with the -recomp threshold parameter to not have opatch compile everything, especially for multi-tenant environments. This can be a lifesaver here. Patching a container database means datapatch does simply the right thing. Only open PDBs will be patched, true. And it patches always the CDB $root first, and then the seed and the PDBs in parallel. Don't expect over parallelism. So the process itself is a bit limited, and it has nothing to do with data patches. Basically, the libraries which we use underneath owned by the multi-tenant guys, and there the parallelism is really a bit limited. We do our best here. Then verify the results. Verifying the results means you check the log files, you test appropriately beforehand. Standby first could be a very good idea. And you roll back or reapply if necessary, and hopefully this doesn't happen so often. One important thing is, when you have pluggable databases, and you unplug and plug, since 18C, the PDB in the CDB registry SQL patch or DBA registry SQL patch has a new column called patch directory. And in this column, there's a blob, and this contains the SQL changes. So let's say you have a PDB in 19.7, and you would like to unplug it and plug it into 19.6. Now, in the old days, you would have copied around files on disk, because in 19.6, you'll need to roll out the 19.7 changes, and they are not known to your 19.6 home. But as they are contained in the PDB, now we can roll this back, and this makes life much easier since 18C. And finally, I would like to give you an intro into special features. And one special feature I really, really love a lot is install and patch in one pass. And I would like to demo this as well. So since 18C, you can install and patch at the same time. As you'll be aware already, when you download now 19C for grid infrastructure or database, it gets you always 19.3, a zip file. And you need to apply the most recent release update on top before you start working with that. So what you do is, for GI, you create a directory. I call mine here 19.7 because it's 19.7, not 19.9 for whatever reason. I go into this directory, I unzip the base image, which is 19.3.0 grid home, and I unzip also the bundle patch, the release update. In this case, 19.7. And then I start grid setup, but I pass on the patch directory with -apply RU. And the same works for the database. Same thing. Or on the bottom of the slide, you can even include one-off patches. So I not only apply the release update, I apply also some one-offs on top of it. And this is all in one pass, and I would like to show you this with a very quick demo here. So I install and patch with one command. And I really love that feature. I use it all the time. So what I do here, and this is 19.7, so I recorded this a few months back actually. This is database installation. So I create a directory 19.7, and now I copy in 19.3, the database home, and I copy in also 19.7, the release update. Both are zip files. So I unzip them. Here are the zip files. I unzip the 19.3 software, And then afterwards, I unzip also 19.7 release update. Now they both are existing, unpacked. So we see here, or we don't see something. I first clean up. That's good. Get rid of these zip files. They consume otherwise more than 4 GB. You see, I have this patch directory now, and I run now the installer with -apply RU. And here I pass on the patch directory. So what happens now is the installer will not only apply the patch, it will also check, do all the things necessary. The only thing we could criticize here, if there's a conflict or something is not working well, the messaging is not very informative, not giving you a lot of information. But a patch is applied here, and now the installer gets called. Now the installer looks as before the old days, but basically configures just the environment. So I install software only, Enterprise Edition, into my Oracle base with the users here. I can pass on the sudo credentials or my root password. The installer still will wake me up later on and ask if I'm fine with the sudo or the root credentials being used to run root sh. I push the install button, and then it configures that installation. So no files need to be copied around anymore since 18c. And here this warning coming up saying, hey, are you sure? Yes, of course, because I gave you my credentials already. So yes, I'm sure. Not sure why this warning is coming. Database is installed successfully. Okay, so far so good. This is super cool. But what I wanted to check in addition is when I create now a new database, and intentionally I do what I never do in real life, I use one of the seed databases, the pre-built databases you can set up with the DBCA. Don't do that. Use advanced and custom, much better. So I create a database, I use advanced, but instead of saying custom database, I use now a general purpose or transaction processing database, which is a pre-built image. I wanted to find out if I create now such a database, if this has all the changes in it. And to make it run slowly enough, I create as a container database into my default tree, which is always /u02/oradata. So click on, I don't need a recovery area, say hello to my already existing listener, no vault, no label security. I just shrink the size consumption a bit here for my lab, make it not too big, and still enough for the database creation to work fine. And then we go forward. No EM Express needed. Same password. Yeah, I make it very complicated. You can guess the password, Oracle. Still, you can do that and create a database. Okay, let's do this. And of course, you don't have to sit and wait here. I speed this up by a factor of 100. In reality, this took still 26 minutes. So quite a while. This has mainly to do with the multi-tenant part, adding the PDB afterwards, the PDB $seed and all that. So speed it up, database is there. Now I wanted to connect to the database, and I have a check script which checks for the patches. So I set my Oracle SID, the new SID I created here, DB1970, connect to my database, and here I run a script, which you can download, by the way, also from the scripts section on the upgrade block. And this script checks for patches, and if they applied correctly. And so here you see the box is a little bit moved around, but patches are applied, and it's 1970. So this is what I wanted to see. Is 1970 present in this database when I freshly created? And it is. So finally, tips for patching success. Use out-of-place patching. Reduces the downtime. You just flip your database. You don't destroy your home. Standardize your environment. Use gold images, apply the RUs right away, automate where possible. And as I showed you, and this is why I had this at the end of the presentation, database installation and RU go hand in hand right away. Run util-rp before you invoke datapatch, especially in large environments. This cleans up invalid objects and datapatch will run much, much faster. And just one thing I forgot to say before. When you apply OJVM, the database does not have to be in upgrade mode. Okay? Go to the upgrade block if you don't believe it. It's still, I think, very hard to understand in the README for OJVM. And where applicable, use rug rolling patching, standby first apply to further reduce the downtime. So that's all here from my side. You find the slides on the upgrade blog. So mikedietrich.de.com, go to slides and webinar 2020, scroll down a little bit for patching, and there you find the entire slide deck. I would like to thank you. I would like to thank also the organizers for this great event, and it was a pleasure to be with you. Take care and hope to see you soon all again. Thank you and goodbye.